that, so let's try this. Oh, right, he's got a prolegomena. Okay, that's it. My name is Todd Rester. I'm the Associate Professor of Church History at Westminster Theological Seminary, and this is my wife, Amy Rester. I started at Westminster in July of 2019, and I teach Ancient Church Survey, Medieval Church Survey, as well as some PhD and THM courses that deal with topics from the late medieval period into the Enlightenment. I grew up in a Southern Baptist home with believing parents. The scriptures were drilled into us. We read them at home, but also in our Sunday school classes. In college, struggled with various aspects of faith, but knew that I was a Christian, but was grappling with what did it mean to be a faithful Christian? What did it mean for me to have a grip on Christ? I started having more questions about what it meant to follow after the Lord. Some friends invited me to a Bible study led by a Presbyterian elder, and I didn't really have much exposure to Presbyterianism or the Reformed world. But it was in that environment of Bible studies on Romans. I think we looked at O. Palmer Robertson's Christ of the Covenants and Kuyper's Stone Lectures, and it just kept on rolling from there. A.W. Pink, The Sovereignty of God, Gerhardus Voss, Biblical Theology, and all of those things started helping me understand the scriptures that I had known from my birth. I became a Presbyterian there towards the end of college. And from there, I actually went and I worked in marketing and business for a hospital. And I guess that brings us, well, to Amy.
Well, I grew up in Colorado in a Christian home and attended a Christian school K through 12, then went to Covenant College, and that was really where my faith became personal and learned a lot more. Just the opportunity we had to grow and the teaching that we had there. I'd grown up in a Lutheran church, gave me a lot of good Bible background, but yes, having the preaching opportunities and the Bible classes at Covenant really helped to deepen my faith there. Then I went to nursing school at Baylor in Dallas and always was a labor and delivery nurse. So that leads us to then how we met. We do enjoy answering the question when somebody asks, where do you meet? We say in labor and delivery.
There's always an awkward pause after that moment, and we kind of have learned to relish it, actually.
A couple from Todd's church she had an emergency C-section, and I was their nurse. So Todd came up to me and pray with them. That is when we first met.
We actually didn't say anything to each other that first time. We definitely noticed each other.
We spent more time and got to know each other because this couple had us over for Sunday lunch about 5 weeks later. So in the context of their family, and then spending time with other Christian families and fellowship with church activities, that we got to know each other. And then we got married. It was about 10 months after we met in December, which was after your first semester of seminary and before January term Hebrew.
That's right. We met in February, and I guess it was it April? I was working with the youth group at the time, and you had come to a youth fellowship. I was there working, doing some music and leading a Bible study with the kids. And you showed up. Of course, the whole youth group noticed you because you weren't normally there, and you went and immediately sat by me. Whatever conversations they were having amongst themselves ceased as they began to talk about us. But it was in that environment that I think I first made the comment, I'm headed to seminary, is that okay?
Yeah.
And she answered in the affirmative, and things kind of just developed from there.
What'd you see? Silly brother.
At least we can be together. What's even doing?
It got really dark really fast.
Really? It hasn't gotten dark yet.
You'll see a magical transformation. You just show up. You use your brain. Oh, you told him that.
The Christian, as some of the ancient church fathers would say, the Christian is one who is at home in any country and yet is a stranger in all of them. There's a sense in which growing in the Christian faith, this world is not your home, and yet the people that you are a part of, especially those among the family of God, they are your family always, in this life and the next. As we came into the Michigan area, we were not from that area. We had no family in that area. And a lot of the folks in Michigan, they have these wonderful connections of large families. And we began to realize how important hospitality was in the local church because there were other families that had moved into that area as well. And we didn't have those deep family connections in the area. So hospitality became really important. And it became one of the ways that we could open our home and just be a part of other people's lives and get to know them as we went through the normal rhythms of word and sacraments in the local church, is developing and growing in the fellowship of God's people.
And that helped the children too, that
It
they
did.
became involved and knew other families in the church.
And it also, speaking of that, it brought up a wonderful point in the training of children, that they began to expect it. So who are we inviting over this week? Who's coming over on Sunday for this week? And hospitality just became a normal part of the rhythm of our family. When we went from the United States to the United Kingdom, it was evident to us that we were not from there. And it was evident to everyone else that we were not from there. We didn't have a local accent. We didn't have any family in the area. And to be intentional in your hospitality, to be intentional in your fellowship, it became a great opportunity not only to teach our children, but we also grew in our understanding of how wide and how broad the Christian family is, the Christian church is. And I think one of the processes in ministry is learning that you are at the service of the Lord, and to be willing to say and able to say, we'll go wherever you take us. When we went to Ireland, that's really what it was. We were in a church that we loved and had served in, and I was a ruling elder there, but the Lord opened up opportunities to go further the education and to be part of a larger conversation. And so we felt the call to Northern Ireland, and to go and be a part there. Do you remember the day that we got that email? Someone said, hey, you should look at this position in Northern Ireland.
From two different people.
That's right, two different people. God's providence. Sometimes he opens doors, sometimes he blows out walls. And I remember I was standing in the kitchen holding my phone, and I looked at it and I said, so how do we feel about Northern Ireland? And
I think I asked, was it to visit or to live?
she was going, okay, is this a fellowship? Is this something we're going to do short time? And I was like, no, this could be
4 years?
4 years, and we're going to have to move. And moving, and at that point we had 4 children that we moved abroad to a new culture, a new environment. When we came to Northern Ireland, we brought 21 bags on a plane, which is really fun. If you can imagine a man and his wife and 4 of their children of various ages and stages moving. I mean, I think my daughter's bag, she had this massive 50-pound bag. I think it was larger than she was at one point. And you can just imagine this elephant train of baggage and people kind of winding their way through Heathrow. That's what it was like when we came. And the Lord's shown us how faithful he is. He brought us into a congregation that loved the Lord and loved his word and just loved us. We got to be, people referred to us in this little Northern Irish town, they referred to us as the Americans. You know, not just Americans, the Americans. Have you seen the Americans around? So it was a fun experience for us and for our kids, and we were so blessed in Northern Ireland. But then the opportunity came again. I mean, someone called again and said, hey, there's an opportunity at Westminster to teach church history. And at that point, for us, we knew that this postdoc would be drawing to an end, and we had really been praying about where the Lord would lead and where we would go next. And we came to a point in our life and in our heart where we were willing to stay in the United Kingdom or go elsewhere. We were willing to come back to the United States. We really were laying ourselves open and saying, Lord, wherever you wanted to take us. We showed up in Westminster and just got to know some of the people here and the students. One of the biggest attractions to us of coming back to Westminster was, yes, I could have worked in the history department in Europe, but my goal was to train pastors, not political scientists. That was my heart, and to get to know them. And of course, now we have 5 children. Our oldest is 16 and our youngest is 18 months. 3 boys, 2 girls. It's never a dull moment in this house.
That's the only thing
Oh,
I
he
remember
doesn't know
about
cow
it.
goes
He
moo.
does.
We should teach him that next. What's
Yeah.
the cow say? Cow.
Well, no, he's eating,
the
and
cow
she's
say?
asking him, what does a cow say? Officer, this is how you do a helmet maneuver on an 18-month-old.
There are elements of your pastoral ministry and training for the pastoral ministry that honestly are a curriculum that you don't get to write. The curriculum of loss and pain and perhaps suffering that you may face as you go through your preparation. There's, in our family, we've experienced various losses. We've in our marriage of 18 years, we've had 2 miscarriages. My grandfather, who was such a close point of discipleship in my own life, he was very instrumental, and I knew him as a grandfather, but also as a friend. I was studying Greek in college, and he was trying to learn Greek in his 70s. So there was just points of contact and fellowship as I was headed towards seminary that I had with my grandfather, who was a pastor for many years. Learning from him was such a pleasure. But in 2008, he passed away. He died and went home to be with the Lord. That was a really tough blow. That was in the spring. In the fall of 2008 was when your mom was diagnosed.
Yeah, with stomach cancer, and she died the next spring.
And then in 2011, Amy's dad died suddenly. My grandmother also died, I was very close to. So in a period of about 3 years, 4 people and a miscarriage, it was just a lot of grief. And yet, out of that, what the Lord grew. In 2011, I was ordained as a ruling elder, but it was our family that was called to that ministry in a sense of hospitality and fellowship and discipleship in the context of the church. And that it really is true. We comfort with the comfort with which we ourselves have been comforted. There are conversations that we could not have had with our church members if we hadn't experienced something of the same loss and something of the same pain. We were young, relatively speaking, I guess, and we were having conversations about parents at end-of-life issues with people that were 40 years our senior. And yet at the same time, we're also have been through miscarriages, so we're having conversations with the young couples who are maybe their first pregnancy ended in a miscarriage, and they're terrified about a second pregnancy. So you go through, there's elements of that you couldn't plan, and you certainly wouldn't have chosen, but the Lord's grace is sufficient in the midst of it.
Yeah, and He's faithful to give those opportunities, which then actually grow into closer friendships and closer fellowship with others too.
The Lord's just shown His faithfulness and His mercy over time, and it's a process. You're not going into the pastoral ministry to show your perfections. You're going into the pastoral ministry to show how Christ has made you strong even in the midst of weakness. How Christ has brought a body of believers together in grace. And that's just the part of the joy and the privilege. And part of that is inviting people into your house and into your home and into your life. So I'm excited to see what the Lord's going to do. I mean, there's a simple question that every generation has to ask. Shall the Church of Christ go forward? Shall the Church of Christ go forward in my home? Will the gospel make progress in my life, in my family's life? Is my heart to see the gospel go forward in this country, in this land, among these people? And I think as you go through a seminary environment and a seminary education, it's so important to take that away. It's easy to focus on our own individual circumstances. It's better to lift our eyes and say, shall the gospel go forward in these circumstances? There's a sense in which the things that face the church are not new. There's a sense in which they are new. And we're learning how to take wisdom that's been aged, as it were, in the church and in history and the testimony of the Scriptures, and how to apply that in our own day, in our own circumstances. And it's been our pleasure to work with families as they've moved into the seminary community and moved away. I think that might be one of the hard parts of a seminary environment too. We're constantly getting to know people, but we're also constantly sending people. So that understanding that the people of God, that's a lot like the church in general. There is no pause button on the church life. There's always people moving into the church. There's always people moving in God's providence somewhere else. And so it's cultivating that attitude of ministry in the midst of those changes. At least that's what I've seen in various ways.